All right, guys. So let's continue with chapter 11. Okay, chapter 11 is all about building and managing effective teams. So far we've talked about leadership, motivation, communication, and decision making. Now we ask, how do you turn a group of individuals into a high-performing team? Because the reality is organizations don't succeed because of individuals alone. They succeed because of teams. And your role as a supervisor is to architect and build that team. All right, so let's get started here. So, why work groups form? Okay, why do we build teams or groups? So, here we're going to try to answer that, right? So, there are different uh, reasons why groups form, right? First, we have companionship or and identification. So, people just want connection, right? This is one reason why groups form. Also, we have problem solving groups, right? This is where people come together to find solutions to problems, right? We have protection. People form groups to protect themselves, and we also have behavior guidelines. Groups that find find comfort and they find um, some an environment that they feel comfortable with. Now, and if you look at the bottom here, we have the Hawthorne studies, right? People change behavior because they're being observed. So attention from supervisors increases productivity, and this is very important. But these are some of the reasons why groups form naturally. Okay. Now, and if we go to this one here, this is why work groups are formed, right? Whereas this slide represents how groups form naturally. This is why work groups are created in the workplace. So first of all, we have four types, right? We have the formal group, which is a group that is designated by the supervisor, right? Which it's created according to the formal authority of the organizational chart or assigned by the supervisor. And then we have on the right side here, on the upper right side, we have the formal or specific objective, right? Where this is where groups are brought together to accomplish a specific task, right? Let's say that you've been assigned a goal, and this group came um, together to tackle that goal, right? On the left downside here, we have the informal slash social, right? And this is more, let's say that this group formed naturally because there's similar interests and similar personalities or social interest, right? And then we have on the down right side, lower down right side, we have the informal or advocacy work group, right? And this is where groups share goals. Um, you can say that maybe your philosophical goals align, and we call this sometimes special interest groups, right? Or, advocacy groups. Okay. Now, this is where things can go a little wrong, right? A highly cohesive group, right? That everybody thinks alike, that everybody trusts each other, everybody works closely and everybody feels unified. And this might sound good, like it's a good thing, and it could be, a lot of times it is, but there is a danger, there is a caveat. And we call this sometimes as groupthink, or we call it groupthink, which means that people stop asking questions, right? Or important questions because everybody agrees and they just want to maintain agreement, and everybody wants to be in agreement all the time. And this can bring some red flags because what rather they ignore red flags, right? Let's say that you guys are working on a project and somebody brings up how to do a certain task, and everybody's like, "Yep, yep, sounds good," because that is has been the consensus. Everybody agrees all the time, because you like other team members, right? And they happen to reject alternatives, right? Instead of, hey, what about if we try it this way? What if we tried this other way, right? Everybody just wants to agree. And great supervisors encourage unity, but also a little bit of disagreement, you know, question, the methods and question how it's done, right? We want to avoid groupthink. Okay, so here is where we have the standard work group, just regular people, right? And we turn it into a high performance group or a high performing group, right? We have a standard group with, where individual effort and independent problem solving is normal, right? We have some goals and a traditional top-down management where the supervisor calls all the shots. But we want to transform regular standard work groups or teams into a high performance teams. And how do we achieve that? Well, it's rather simple actually, right? You want to foment teamwork. You want to make sure that there is actual teamwork and not certain individuals carry most of the weight, right? Um, and this is crucial that everybody is pulling their weight. You want to have this synergistic effect, which combines uh, results. But have you ever been part of a group that everybody is working towards the goal, and at the end of the goal, when you reach the goal, it feels like the product it's worth more than the sum of its parts. Well, that's the feeling when you're part of this combined effort. Okay, you want to make sure that the product exceeds um, the sum of its parts, right? And also, you want to have a collaborative approach, right? Not just the manager calling the shots or the supervisor, but you want to make sure that you're listening in to everybody's opinion, right? Now, granted, sometimes it's better to just follow through with the plan, but it's important for us to listen and identify good ideas, right? A lot of the times, people have good ideas, and we want to make sure that we are open. Okay, so here are some criteria, right, for exceptional teams, right? Max number of members, 10. You want to make sure that the max number of members is 10 or less. And you want to make sure that each member has complementary skill sets, right? Let's say that you are working on a program, on a computer science, on a computer program, right? Um, on an app, right? And you want to make sure that, not only you have great coders, but you also have great designers, uh, so that this app has great design, great code, great functionality, not only, great code, right? So you want to make sure that the skills complement each other, right? You want to have specific and realistic goals, and the members are highly committed. Okay. Okay, so this is what happens when a new team is formed, or at least when there's a new supervisor assigned. So every team goes through stages, as you can see here, right? The first stage is when you form the team, right? Everybody tries to be polite. Everybody's, trying to, there's a lot of uncertainty in the team, right? The effectiveness is kind of moderate as everybody is trying to be very polite and there's, nobody disagrees. But then you have what we call the storming stage, which this there might be a little conflict, there might be a little tension. And let's say that a new supervisor was selected, and maybe there's a little pushback. Let's say that this supervisor is bringing new projects or new ambitious goals, and there's a little friction, right? As some uh, employees are pushing back. And there is going to be a period of adjustment per se. But if you get through that, there is a stage we call norming, which the rules are being accepted and there's trust that develops. And there's more effectiveness, right? As you can see here, the line goes up and we achieve a higher effectiveness, right? These norms, these rules are being adopted. And then we get to four, right? Stage four, which is the highly, performing stage, which has very high productivity. And this is when we reach that synergistic effect. Everybody is working towards the goal, and the product is exceptional. Right? The product, what the end product, whatever it may be, is of quality because the product ends up being greater than the sum of its parts, right? And then you have, a little here with stage five, which is when the task is concluded, right, and the project ends. And here's the key insight, right? Here, let's go back to the friction zone. This is critical because most teams fail in this storming stage. Supervisors must be patient, right? They must coach, they must guide, and they must stabilize these teams because this is crucial when forming new teams. Okay, so now let's talk about high performance teams, right? So imagine these are, the three pillars of high performance teams. So first you have structural support, and this is where you have your roles are clearly set. You have strong leadership, and there's training, right? There's coaching. Um, there's clear roadblocks. The fellow members are, there's team rules, they're established, and all of that. And then we have collaborative culture, right? Trust and respect, right? This is when we'll start having open communications, right? There's trust between the employees and the supervisor. And we have healthy disagreements, right? There's healthy conflict. We can go back and forth and, and, agree to disagree and try to not try to be right, but we want to make sure that we're doing what's best for the project, best for the company or the goals, right? And then we have process and execution, which is when we take, we think outside of the box, right? To hopefully reach those goals. We want to establish feedback systems, and we want to always continue to improve, right? If one of these pillars is weak, right, the team's going to struggle. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at virtual teams, right? So let's look at the modern uh, uh, workplace. So remote teams are growing fast, and supervisors must manage, right? So clear expectations, shared language, strong communication tools, define workflows, build relationships, maintain connections. And the key is distance makes leadership harder, right? Because there might be this communication barrier. So communication must be very, very strong, right? Maintain communications. A lot of us have worked in virtual settings, so uh, this might make communication harder, but always try to remain closely connected to the employees. All right. So now let's zoom in and talk about the individual, right? Here we show how employees are under two kinds of pressures, or pressures from two sides per se. We have external factors, and these could be, issues with family. Somebody is sick in the family, somebody passed away in the family, and these are, outside of our control as supervisors, right? Something horrible happens to an employee, and uh, this might have an effect on on said employee. Let's say that this same employee is going through financial difficulties. Same, this might affect the employee, and relationship issues, life issues, right? Uh, um, Maybe they're taking care of a dependent, or their vehicle is broke down, right? All of these are external factors, right? Factors that are outside, out of our hands, right? So now let's talk about internal factors, right? Internal factors, we talk about job security. Are they, are they going to have a job, right? Work conditions, are the conditions in the workplace safe, right? And recognition, right? Is this employee doing a good job, and is he or she being praised, right? These are internal factors, right? Compensation, job security, the nature of the work, relationship with co-workers, recognition, right? So these are the two kinds of pressures that the individual employee is facing, at all times, basically. Um, Now let's talk about morale. And morale is basically a composite of feelings, right? How do we feel about work? How do we feel about working conditions? How do we feel about the supervisors and the business in itself? And obviously, we want employees to have a positive morale, right? That they feel good about their work, right? They feel that they enjoy their work. Okay. All right. Okay. So now let's talk about the negative catalyst model, right? And this is very powerful. It shows how life problems can affect work, right? Some of the causes, substance abuse, stress, personal issues, as we said before. These are the causes, right? How is this going to affect work? Well, the quality or the performance of the employee is going to be lower. Absenteeism, they're going to be absent. There's going to be turnover. A lot, this employee might quit or might cause accidents. Okay. So the key idea, work problems often start as life problems, right? So supervisors must look deeper, right? Not just look at performance, but realize that these employees are human beings, and they might have problems at home, and we as supervisors, we should identify and just be ready to deal with some of these issues. Okay, so how do we diagnose say the ecosystem of the business, right? How do we diagnose the workplace? So we have a couple of tools, right? We can do what we call direct measurement, right? Observe, run surveys to see how employees feel about their work. A lot of times, this helps, and we can make adjustments out of that. Maybe everybody's having a great time and everybody loves their job, but in some cases, this is not it, right? Some employees might be having a miserable time at work, so it's important for us to understand. Let's say that somebody leaves, decides to quit, and we want to run what we call an exit interview. And this is to assess, why this employee decided to quit, right? So because we want to address what we call this high turnover ratio, right? Maybe there's morale issues. We want to get to the bottom of why a lot of employees are leaving the company. Because remember that it's more expensive for us to keep hiring new workers as besides to having the employee perform at a high level, right? Because remember that the more experience they have, the better the product they're gonna come up with. All right, so structural repairs. So how do we fix some of these issues? Well, we want to make sure that we know what is happening, right? So we can fix systems. So we want to measure, diagnose, and fix. Um, we want to make sure that if there's anything that's hindering effectiveness, we can address it. We call this organizational development, right? And we want to, again, measure, diagnose, and fix. All right, so counseling and intervention. Um, Now, this is how we address some of these issues. So when there's a problem, first we have to ask, is this a skill issue or a personal issue, right? Train or coach, right? Do we train or coach? If it's a personal issue, we counsel, and look at the approach, right? Ask questions, listen, don't give answers immediately, right? Because the goal is obviously to help employees solve their own problems, right? So you can follow this little flow chart, and here you determine if it's a skill deficiency or maybe a lack of coaching or training, right? And then just follow through the flow chart. Okay, so some systems that exist today to support employees, right? We have FMLA, which grants 12 unpaid weeks for medical problems, birth or adoptions, what have you. This requires by law that employees can come back to their job, right? And their job is going to be secured for them, right? We have EAP, right? Employee assistance programs. And these are some programs to help them deal with alcoholism or substance abuse, marriage problems, what have you, just so that they can hopefully solve some of those problems and get back to work, right? A lot of employers offer wellness programs to promote healthy lifestyle and maintain productivity, right? And also there is many employers offer paid time off or PTO, and these are flexible time off between vacations, right? So if they have to go to the doctor, they have certain days out of the year that they can address some of these issues. Okay. Now this is the big picture, right? Because this is a continuous cycle, right? So you have um, the construction of teams, which is you build teams. They might be friction, problems arise. We saw that. But we have intervention, coaching, support, and then we go to restoration, right? The employee recovers, hopefully solves that problem. And then the cycle repeats, right? Um, so the final insight, I would say, this is always a cycle, right? It never ends, right? As an organization, we want to get better. We want to make sure that employees are taken care of and they're working at their best and they're happy, right? Uh, they feel recognized as well. So let's wrap it up here, guys. So great supervisors build strong teams, manage dynamic groups, support individuals, solve problems early. And the biggest takeaway, you're not just managing work, you're managing an ecosystem of people, right? All right, guys, so I'm going to stop it here and I'll see you in chapter 12.